What's good, everyone? Here we are, another episode of the Tyler Hill podcast. Today we have Chelsea Long, which is so exciting for a myriad of reasons. We are kindred spirits, I think, in a lot of ways, and how we view God in our stories, our journeys. But we also have some funny little intersections in the ways in which the background of our lives have crossed paths. There's just so much good stuff here. I'm so excited to host the soon to be author, the creative, the well of wisdom that is Chelsea Long. Welcome to the podcast, Chelsea.
Thanks, Tyler. Super fun to be here.
Yeah. Um, so we're going to get into all the good stuff, but we are also more, of course, always than what we do, what we teach, what we say, what we produce. So I want to start here. Let's say, Chelsea, you have a couple $100. You have a day to yourself. You got, a good full day or even a couple hours. What does Chelsea do with a little bit of free time? What makes you just come alive when we're letting go of work, letting go of responsibility? What's Chelsea doing with just a little bit of freedom in her life?
Love the question. It's funny that you asked because today I woke up this morning and was thinking, like, there's this uh, little place down in Mexico. I live in San Diego, so I live about 20 minutes from the border. And then about 30 minutes past there by car is this beautiful little spot right on the beach that I go with my family a lot. But this morning I woke up thinking, like, how do I get down there? I always like to have a little trip planned. And one of my good friends who used to live in San Diego but moved to Texas, she's coming into town on Monday. And I was thinking, like, can we scheme up a little trip down there? So that's the answer that I'll give
Yeah.
today.
Quick trip to Mexico. What is what are some of your hobbies? What are some of the things that make you come alive? In the evening or in the morning, as you go throughout your daily rhythm. What are some of those things that make Chelsea uniquely Chelsea?
Gosh, I feel like basic and kind of boring things, but I mean, I love reading. So
Yes.
I'm always reading. I'm in several book clubs.
Mm,
So uh, love reading. I love, like just in the evening, making a cup of tea, reading. We have a nice little fire pit, a gas fire pit in my backyard. So just like hanging out back there,
yeah.
or on our front if we want to be a little more like watching what's going on in the neighborhood.
Sure.
But I'm such a homebody. I also love like I usually have a puzzle going. Again, very
Mm.
kind of grandma core, but it's funny. The other day it was like it was the afternoon and I was kind of getting dinner ready and my kids were running around and they had been kind of hyper and, you know,
Yes.
so I sat down and put some music on and was like, oh, I'll work on the puzzle for a few minutes. And then my kids came in from the backyard and they were like, it's nice in here. And I'm like, yeah, it's nice in here. Like, it's
Yeah.
calm. We're
Yes.
doing calm activities. So I feel like so much of the world feels like it's on fire.
Yes.
And so I'm kind of always trying to bring the vibe to a calming place. That's like a major goal for
Yeah.
me lately.
Yeah. It's so important. Have you always had a bend toward the more simmering and settled part of you, or is that something you've had to kind of learn to embody throughout your story?
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like I've become more introverted as I've gotten older. I'll often say that I feel like motherhood kind of made me an introvert because you're never alone
Yes.
for so many years of your life. And so I'm like, now I feel like I'm paying back the debt of alone time. But like, I feel like in my younger years, I was a lot more outgoing and
Mhm.
down to party. I feel like now I'm still down to party, but I always feel like it's not going to be worth it. And then I get out and I'm like, oh, that was worth it. Like
Yeah.
that was fun. I should leave the house for. So
I get
it's a
that.
good balance. I've been thinking about that a lot too lately of like, what am I doing for fun? Like what am
Yeah.
I like you're asking me like what am I just doing that makes me
Mhm.
happy? I actually really like to play tennis with my
Mm.
sister. We do that. I love the beach. I mean, I'm so lucky I live like 10 minutes from the
Yep.
beach by car. And so I try to get out there as much as I can because I'm like, what if I don't always live here? I don't want to regret that.
Totally.
And actually with my family lately, I live close to downtown San Diego, so we live very close to Balboa Park and there's all the museums and the zoo. And so on weekends, we've been trying to like kind of be more like tourists in our own city and just go to
Yep.
Balboa Park, see what's going on, check out one of the museums or, that kind of thing. So
Yep.
that's been fun. I tend to kind of be a big homebody and then I'm like, oh yeah, but leaving the house is nice
Yeah.
too. So
Totally.
yeah.
Um, I'm a big fan of the library in San Diego. That
Yes.
big one in downtown San
I was
Diego
just there
is
yesterday.
is
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I'm a huge, one of my sweatshirts that I sell on my website is the library influencer
yes.
sweatshirt. So I'm
Yep.
a huge library fan and I'm there, I mean, no exaggeration, probably 3 to 4 times a week. So
Yeah. I love that. Love that. Would you consider San Diego home? Like, is that the place that formed you? Is that your roots?
I grew up in the Midwest. I grew up in Akron, Ohio, hometown of
Mm.
LeBron James.
Mm-hmm.
He's a year older than me, so we were in high school at the same time, and it was a whole thing. But I have lived in Southern California since 2011. I've lived in San Diego since 2015, so almost 10 years.
Yep.
And I do feel like San Diego is home. I don't see myself going anywhere else.
Yep.
2 out of my 3 kids were born here, and it's weird to think like my kids when they grow up will be like, I'm from San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm super rooted here, particularly in my neighborhood, as a part of my neighborhood faith community that I've been in for 10 years. So yeah, the sense of place is really strong for me here,
Yep.
particularly in my neighborhood in San Diego.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Um, Real quick, because I have some Midwestern roots as well. I'm curious, what's the juxtaposition for you in your lived experience from growing up in the Midwest, which is beautifully unique, Southern California, also wildly and beautifully unique, not the same. How have you evolved from a Midwestern girl to a Southern California girl? What has that evolution? What Midwestern, um, spice do you bring still to your life down there? Are you a casserole person? What's that like for you?
I'm a huge potato person,
Love
which
it.
is funny because living here, I feel like I will generalize and say many Americans do not have a good sense of geography,
Uh-huh.
and many native Californians don't even have a good sense of like American geography. So a
Yes.
lot of times if I say I'm from Ohio, it's like the glazed over look. And often I know people are thinking Idaho. And then I just mentioned potatoes, but Idaho is much closer to California than Ohio. But
Yes.
yeah, I'm definitely like I will say San Diego, San Diego does brunch very well, but it doesn't do diner, like the greasy spoon diner. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
do it that well. So I feel like
Oh,
that is something that's very Midwestern. I'm a big breakfast girl, so like
love
I'm
it.
always having a hearty breakfast. I think the other thing that is very Midwestern of me is I'm really earnest.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think sometimes I feel embarrassed by that, but also I'm trying to make earnestness great again. So
Love it.
I think it's important. But yeah, and I mean, family value. Like, I don't know. I grew up super close with my family. I grew up, it's the heart of it all. I grew up in a very like white Christian megachurch
Yep.
bubble that was like family, church, homeschool, and then I went to a Christian school. So I feel like that kind of those roots of like conservative white evangelicalism, for better or worse, that's where I came from. And
Yes.
so I feel like when I moved here, um, people from back home were like, "Oh, you moved to California and became so liberal." And I'm like,
Yeah.
"Well, I found the Christian culture out here to be much more, I don't know, open and diverse,
Yes.
which to me I see as a positive. But it has been a shift for me over the last, you know,
Yeah.
I guess over a decade now.
Yeah. I didn't move across the country, but I did go to college, and that was often a similar narrative. Oh, Tyler went to college and now he's changed because he went to college. Now yeah, theology
Yep.
and I get
Hmm.
that. What Oh man, there's already so many questions I want to ask. I've been very excited about this. You're also my second interview this week from Ohio, which is very
No
fun.
way. I
Um,
feel like I'm always meeting people who are from Ohio. And
yep,
also, like if you pay attention on like movies or shows or whatever, if there's ever a random state, it's
yep.
usually Ohio. It's like, oh, I have an aunt in Ohio.
Yeah,
You know what I
that's
mean?
funny.
And
That's
now
funny.
like the kids, Ohio is like slang. Have you heard this?
I don't, but my kids are too young for me to be in the slang
Okay.
world yet, but
Yeah,
I'm on the
yeah.
way. So no,
It's
I don't
like
know.
Ohio is like slang for bad or like not cool.
Mm,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
That's
So,
yeah, there it is.
no,
Well,
no.
let's reclaim it. I think it's
I
cool.
know.
Alex Lewis, you should check him out. And for those of you listening, 2 or 3 episodes ago, great writer out of uh out of Ohio. But um I guess let's start here. You mentioned your community since 2019 that you've been in. I think you said 2009,
2015.
2015.
Yeah.
Um, Isolation. Nobody has friends. We're all only on the internet. You have engaged in this community that is wildly beautiful. I'm mildly familiar with it. Paint us a little bit of a picture of just what it looks like, how it's been countercultural to so much of the world around. Just let us into a little bit what that community looks like and your role in it and how that has just blossomed with for you, your community, your family, and the like.
Sure. So as I mentioned, I moved to Southern California in 2011 after I got married, and we lived up in Orange County,
Hmm.
so a couple hours north of here. But we had close friends who had moved to San Diego to kind of establish oh my gosh, to establish which at the time was a missional community. That was kind of like
Yep.
the trend, I
Yep.
guess. And so we were always watching what they were doing and loving it. My husband and I actually met on a missions trip. And so we were a part of a small team. So community life was kind of core to my husband and I, how our relationship started.
Hmm.
And over the next couple of years, we would come visit our friends in San Diego. They would come visit us, and we would always feel like the way in which they are kind of living church with neighborhood as the context is our ideal. But at the time, we didn't live there. Fast forward to 2015, after we had had our first kid, I actually had there's a lot more details to the story, but I just had this really strong, like over the years, we would always be like, should we move to San Diego? Like this kind of quote unquote ideal
Hmm.
community exists. Like if we could choose how we wanted to kind of live out our faith with other people, that's it. But it was always practical things keeping us where we were. So finally, I kind of got to a point where I was like, no, let's just move to San Diego. And so my husband was like, okay, let's do it. So we moved to San Diego right before Christmas in 2015.
Hmm.
And the community is now I will often refer to it as a house church just because that's kind of understandable language
Sure.
for it. But we're just a group of families and neighbors. And it's kind of always morphing and shifting. Right when we moved into the neighborhood, there were kind of two sister communities that had been one and then had gone to three. And, like we're kind of always shifting based on season of life, number of people in the community. It used to be a lot more structured, where like they had a kind of internship program. People would come and learn about doing life in the neighborhood. And kind of over the years, a lot has shifted, mostly because most of us were going through some kind of like faith deconstruction.
Sure.
And so when I kind of landed in the neighborhood, I was a mess. Like I was a year and a half postpartum from, some traumatic experiences, and I had started really questioning everything that I had been raised with, but I was in a lot of grief too because I didn't ask for those questions. I was like,
Yep.
I don't know what I believe at all, but I know that I still want to be a Christian. Like, I still want to follow Jesus. And so moving into the neighborhood, into the community, was really this experience for me of experiencing belonging in Christian community without any requirement of belief.
Wow.
And that was really the first time that I had experienced that. And I couldn't have even articulated that. But I think before that, up to that point, I was 27. I was, born and raised in church. And I feel like because of the way it was my entire world, I couldn't even see the ways in which I had kind of molded and conformed myself to the
Mhm.
culture, because I was just very incentivized to not ask questions, kind of go with the flow,
Yep.
kind of do the things that I'm supposed to do. And I had been able to do that. Like I had been able to make all the right choices, follow kind of the path. Um, and it wasn't until after I had a baby and I kind of started experiencing the cracks of like, wait, I'm following the path that I feel like was laid out for me as a good Christian woman, but it's not it's bringing me pain, it's bringing me trauma,
Hmm.
and I did not expect that.
Yep.
I kind of thought I'm just going to be rewarded for making all the right decisions. So honestly, like when I moved into the neighborhood, it was really in the midst of like a crisis of identity and in a crisis of theology,
Hmm.
not a crisis of faith, because I was like, I know I'm like, I cannot imagine my life without God. And so that was kind of how I moved into the neighborhood. And then I was really able to heal in community and wrestle through issues in community. And, we look very much like maybe what you would expect. It's like we have a Sunday gathering, we meet in living rooms or the park. We read books together, we study scripture together. We also, because we don't all live in the same exact neighborhood anymore because of cost of living in San Diego, but we live generally in the same area and we intentionally kind of have margin in our lives and create context to be gathering together. And some
Yep.
of them are, explicitly Christian or religious, like our Sunday gathering. We're reading through Acts and studying Acts right now. And then other ones are just fun, like women's book club in the neighborhood and for years we kind of had like a moms group meetup, and how we articulate our gathering now is basically we try to create spaces of belonging in our neighborhood.
Hmm.
And the spaces, we see them as kind of all a part of this ecosystem, but these spaces are distinct and they serve distinct purposes. They may include distinct groups of people. Some groups are more kind of closed. Some groups are more open to neighbors and friends. And so honestly, like the one thing that is true is that it's always shifting. So at the
Yes.
moment, we still actually have two sister communities who both have like a Sunday circle of people who are committed. And then we have tons of other overlap in our lives. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's been this kind of social fabric that we've been weaving in the neighborhood for, I think the people who have been here the longest is 17 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you recall, Chelsea, like a moment when you were first starting to be in this community and you really became awake to that radical welcoming? Like, was there a moment or an experience you had with a person or a group that really clarified, like, I really do belong here. I'm curious about how they were truly able to cultivate that deep sense of belonging.
You know what I think it is? So we came here in 2015. I was like barely hanging on by a thread. Um, and just felt very held, felt like nothing was wrong with me. Like it's okay where you are. And over the years, I mean, we were here in 2016.
Mhm.
Um, I was actually just writing about this, and um, so felt a lot of disillusionment about a lot of the white evangelical political leanings. And I think that moment, being in a community that was also kind of grappling with those things and
Yep.
kind of unwilling to gaslight ourselves about what we were seeing and experiencing and the ways that we felt like it was so anti the way of Christ. So I think that was a really pivotal moment. And then
Mhm.
fast forward. like 3 years in 2019. So I kind of realized in, again, like kind of over the years and through experiences, because our community is very non-hierarchical, we do have
Yeah.
like what we call a guiding council. But it's like basically someone just has to kind of make decisions, but it's very like we make decisions kind of mutually and by consensus. We share kind of different leadership or like administrative aspects of kind of running the community. We share kind of teaching responsibilities, all of the things. And so I had, many opportunities to kind of bring an idea to the group and then lead on, Sunday gatherings.
Mm,
And it was through a lot of those experiences. And then just, I kind of started realizing I was doing a lot of reading from like a variety of perspectives of like Christian traditions, different kind of theologians. And I kind of realized like, oh, I actually really like studying theology.
hmm.
I spent like many years where I could not come to the Bible like on my own terms. I was still encountering the Bible through our community, but like I would never just sit down and read the
Sure.
Bible. But I was reading all of these other books from like contemplative tradition, from liberation theologian, womanist and feminist theology, like all of the things. And I finally got to a point where I was then able to kind of go back to the Bible and see the Bible through my own lens
Yes.
and kind of trust what the Spirit was speaking to me and then bring that to my community. And actually, I remember that felt super new
Mm,
to bring what for me felt like this is edgier, this is radical, or I've never heard anyone question the Bible in this way or
yep.
put these ideas together. So I remember this one time we used to, a couple years back, have this couple in our community who are like in their 60s. And they're both like writers. They're amazing. They're like lifetime missionaries and writers. And the husband is a professor at a seminary here out in Southern California. And I remember one time I brought some teaching to the community. And again, it's like 16 adults. So it's a really small context, but like for me, it's where I have learned leadership and to kind of trust my own perspective on the Bible and
Yes.
trust that I, from my kind of embodied experience and my study, have something to bring that's of value to the community. And so I remember I shared something, and this guy, this seminary professor, like I haven't been to seminary, but I identify as a theologian nonetheless. And he came up to me and was like, I have never thought about that
Mhm.
in that way. And it's funny because it's like I don't want to need external validation. It's kind of part of the reason why I don't want to go to seminary right now because I'm like I can just do this. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like of my own accord. But still to have the validation from
Yes.
this like this man that I really respect,
Hmm.
seminary professor, like has written books, and for him to say like you taught me something,
Yes.
um
Mhm.
yeah, it felt really good. And I, kind of going back to you were kind of asking about like just this particular way in which we live church in our neighborhood. It's it's so embodied, it's so grounded, it's so
Mhm.
informed by our place. And so there was this period of years. I mean, that was 2019. We're in 2025 now. There was this period of years where I was doing that kind of work for my community,
Mhm.
for my friends and neighbors. And then at some point, I just started to get a little more curious about like, well, what we're doing is like working for us in the sense that I mean, I have been healed from so much of my hurt
Yep.
through community. We have grown and learned so much together. Like we have experienced an increase in the fruit of the spirit, whatever metric you want to put on it.
Sure.
Um, and so it that became a turning point maybe in 2023 where I started to maybe trust that what was happening in our neighborhood had something that could be taught to
Mm.
like the capital C church or, like other
Yep.
people beyond,
Yep.
our limited context. And so that was a big turning point for me in kind of trusting like, oh, well, this is actually working for us here.
Yep.
So maybe this could be helpful for
Wow.
other people too.
it it seems like if there's a simmering theme, if I was to like kind of investigate just a little bit, that in this community, yes, it was the community, but that you came with a lot of suffering. You were holding a lot of sorrow and pain and grief. And yes, there was people to hold you, but almost like you wouldn't have experienced this great welcoming if you weren't carrying something that was like dangerous or flammable or very vulnerable. Like you were carrying these very deep wounds, these my old spirituality is not serving me anymore. Carrying a life postpartum, which comes with so many various heavy weights to carry. Um, Suffering seems to be one of the main ingredients that brought you to the community in order to be held. Like Chelsea, in almost every way, it seems, wouldn't be the Chelsea I'm sitting with today if she didn't bring such suffering from her story. Does that resonate? Am I off base there?
No, it does. It does. It's interesting because I thought about this so often because I came in with a lot of suffering and grief, but it was really just the tip of the iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
And moving here in 2015, I had a 1.5-year-old, and my husband and I were trying to conceive and experienced secondary infertility.
Hmm.
Went through fertility treatments, which is its own
Yes. Yes.
experience.
Yes.
That's really, really hard to put to words. I experienced a miscarriage. And then actually in 2017, my best friend and community mate and really like pastor was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then from
Mm-hmm.
2017, on, that kind of dominated a
Yes.
lot of what was happening with the community because we just we exist like for each other. And so that was the thing that was happening to all of us. And then she passed away in 2021. I had twins in 2017 right after she was diagnosed. So, and that was, again, a blessing and
Yep.
such a challenge. And so there's just so many things, but like to kind of put a point on like the suffering and the grief, I think what it made me realize is the theology that I had been handed
Mm-hmm.
was the theology of the privileged.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I still think about that a lot. Like this year, I did a whole theme around Lent,
Mm-hmm.
um, where I said like, let's fast from the patriarchy and feast on wisdom, because in the Bible, the wisdom of God is personified as a woman. But I feel like I'll get these little thoughts like, yeah, I feel like Lent
Mm.
as a church season or as a practice is a theology created by people who haven't just naturally suffered.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, hey, we haven't suffered enough.
Yeah.
Let's impose suffering on
Yeah.
ourselves. Like let's fast. Um, and my whole thing is like, I feel like we've suffered enough. Like I've had my body broken,
Yes. 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 Yes.
I have had, like I have bled. I have nourished life from my body in a variety of ways. And so that's the kind of stuff that I love to kind of get into, which, riles people up. But it's like this is theology from my body.
Yes.
And I think for the majority of Christian history and tradition and interpretation, it has been theology from the body of men and from the minds of men.
Yeah.
And there are so many things that men can't see because they
Yes.
haven't experienced. And so it feels, important to for me
Mm.
to look at the scripture and say, here's where I actually see my experience of suffering and
Yes.
grief reflected back to me. And really, it wasn't until 2021, um, when my friend died. It was during Lent, and I had really wrestled with Easter as a holiday for a couple years because I was like, I don't feel happy. I don't feel like I'm experiencing resurrection. And I feel like the world wants to rush us from Good Friday up to Easter. And I just feel stuck in the unknown, in the grief. And so after losing her during that season, it really sent me back into like those narratives around Holy Week. and started noticing like the very real human emotions of everybody involved in the story
Yes.
and finding a lot of permission. I think that's the whole thing is like finding so much permission in this community, in this safe community to literally just show up. Like I just did it the other day too. We're studying Acts. We were reading the story of Ananias and Sapphira,
Uh-huh.
and you're probably familiar, but just a brief recap. It was like the early church. This couple sold some land or property, brought money to the church, and lied and said that it was all of the money, but they kept some back. And then basically, like, God struck them dead. So it's like not, I don't know, like it's a messed up story.
Yep.
And I feel like for my entire life, I was always asked to do a lot of mental gymnastics to call things good that I was like, this isn't good. Like, I don't
Yep.
think this is good. And last year we studied the Beatitudes, like the teachings of Jesus. And so I'm like, I don't really know how to square
Yep.
the teachings of Jesus, like mercy, grace, all these things, with this story, which feels more like an Old Testament, like wrath of God story, So we're wrestling through it together. And I kind of felt like throughout the night as we were talking about it, people were kind of doing that thing where it's like, well, I don't see how this is good, but it must be good because God did it. And like at the very end, we're kind of, like, let's wrap it up and what are we going to take away from tonight? And I just said, like, I just want to say, I haven't reached that place yet with this story where I understand it in a way that feels life-giving. And I just want to name that. Like I don't want to
Mhm.
feel like I have to call this good if I don't see it as good. And maybe there's something I'm missing. Like I will keep studying it. And maybe I can also just say like, I think
Yes.
this sucks. Like I feel like they should have gotten another chance. Like that's okay too.
Yes.
So I feel like I'm still doing that. And I think we need that as Christians. Like we need permission to just say what we actually think. Because I feel like I lived the first 27 years of my
Mm.
life not saying what I actually thought because I knew what I was supposed to think?
Yes. Yes. Um, so clearly we've touched on your spiritual evolution, that there's been a journey for you. Um, and much of this journey, whether again, there's myriads of words that we like to use, but your evolution, your deconstruction, your reconstruction, the new ways Chelsea's spirituality has been embodied. You write a lot about how motherhood was often the catalyst for that evolution. Could you allow us into that story and how motherhood really did begin to take you on this journey that you've been on to much of your spiritual liberation?
Definitely. Yeah. So when I had my first pregnancy and birth, I was still attending a evangelical church. And I remember, so I had a really uncomplicated pregnancy, but I still remember kind of from early on in my pregnancy feeling really alone, feeling like I didn't know how to put words to the experience. Um, I had one friend at that time, one close friend who had had a baby, but it wasn't many friends in my close circle. And so I remember even like, I don't know how to even share this experience with my husband because
Mhm.
it's not happening to him in the same way that it's happening to
Yes.
me.
Yes.
And then I'm an Enneagram 1.
Mm.
I call myself a recovering perfectionist.
Yes.
And I was so focused on achieving this kind of like ideal birth.
Mhm.
I read all the books about natural birth and I had a doula and all the things. But when it came down to it, I ended up having like a super long labor. I did labor at home for a long time and then went to the hospital. And actually showed up at the hospital like really far along and was like,
Mhm.
yes. And then just didn't progress, like could not
Mm.
progress farther. We'll come to find out that my baby was what they call sunny side up, so
Mhm.
facing the wrong way. They're supposed to be head down facing kind of out your back, and he was facing forward.
Yeah.
And So after like 50 something hours of labor, I ended up
Uh-huh.
having a C-section. And and then that kind of just marked the start. But I so clearly remember when they kind of told me like this is what's going to happen, like you're going to have a C-section. Um, I feel like I just left my body
Wow.
because I think I didn't know it in that moment, but that's just like so many of us growing up in spaces where we're not allowed to show up as we are, we
Yes.
do tend to just disembody, to like disassociate,
Mhm.
whether that's from our bodies or from like parts of our psyche. Um, and so I was already like very well practiced at that skill. And so in that moment, it's like I literally was not in my body. Like I don't remember that.
Yes.
I don't remember holding him
Hmm.
like after he was born. Um, I remember feeling like such a failure. Like I didn't achieve
Wow.
this birth that
Mhm.
it's like I had so bought into like this is what you're made for and God made you this way. And I had also bought into like my role as a wife and a mother. And it's like I'm already starting out as a failure.
Mhm.
And so and so much shame and not feeling like even feeling too much shame to even articulate any of those things. So just really internalizing like a lot of that, like what is wrong with me? And I think, I mean, it took me many more other traumatic experiences related to like kind of reproductive journey, um, and then lots of just reading and learning and studying and kind of realizing um, and also feeling like I came to the realization late in life because of my privilege, right? So when I started to kind of question like the way that things in this white evangelical worldview didn't work for me, so many of my like queer friends or black friends would be like, yeah, like welcome to
Mhm.
the real world.
Yes.
You were able to exist within this kind of bubble of privilege, of theology of privilege because of your privilege.
Mhm.
And realizing that kind of my area of marginalization was my femininity,
Mhm.
my body, like my
Yes.
literal body being a liability
Mhm.
to the theology that I had been raised with, because the
Yes.
theology that I was raised with ignores femaleness and ignores
Yes.
uh, non-whiteness, blackness, queerness.
Mhm.
There's not a place for it there because it wasn't formed
Yes.
with those types of bodies in mind.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I think I often will say kind of like motherhood brought me to a breaking point because I couldn't operate from the false self, if we want to use that kind of language. Like it just absolutely brought me to this breaking point of operating out of who I thought I was supposed to be rather than
Yes.
who I actually am. And
Yes.
I had to work really hard over a period of years to like come to a place of coherence between kind of my inner world, like what I actually thought and what I actually wanted, and then how I was showing up in the world. And it was really, really hard and painful because I was honestly like, I was like 30 by the time I finally
Mhm.
started to trust that I could just ask for what I want or say what I think,
Mhm.
and find acceptance, like even with the closest people in my life, like even with people in my community. It's like,
Mhm.
you know me really well, and I'm
Yeah.
still scared to show up.
Totally.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. So this experience, deeply embodied as a mother, beginning to identify even with Christ and his feminine nature, a broken body and shed blood, really began to take you deeper into your own feminine experience, it seems,
Hmm.
which then opens up so much when it comes to the ways we engage with the divine. We find the feminine nature of God. Walk us through just a little bit that portal. Let's say, and there definitely will be people on this podcast who this language is foreign. Feminine
Yeah.
God. I
It's
live in
scary.
I live in a really funny place where anyways. what changed? What did you begin to see? How did you begin to embrace this more expansive and especially this feminine picture of God, especially as it pertains to the way in which your body led you there?
Hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's like you're saying, it's a really foreign concept for a lot of people. There's so many things I could say. I mean, most of us, like me, we're kind of taught to ignore our bodies or suppress
Yes.
our bodies, or and I think that's inclusive of all of us, right? Um,
Mm-hmm.
we were taught to, there's just so many little verses that come to mind,
Yes.
like Paul talking, especially. Um, So there's a lot that I could go into theology wise with just the body.
Hmm.
But I think that's part of what makes it really uncomfortable for people because we aren't taught to honor our bodies, even though the Bible says your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit.
Yes.
That's like a capstone kind of verse for me, um, because it made me realize that any experience that we have happens in our body. Like any
All of it.
spiritual experience that we have, it's still happening in the context of our body.
Yes. Yes.
And Christianity is not unique in kind of teaching us to try and like transcend our body or like escape our body. That happens in so many spiritual
Yeah.
traditions, but it's actually through embodied spiritual practice, which my first experience with that was yoga.
Hmm.
I was like, this is doing something to me. This is teaching me how to
Yes.
pray with my whole body. So I often will say, like, Christianity told me what to do, and yoga taught me how to do it.
Yes.
And then it was really cool because years later, once I discovered contemplative Christianity, I was stoked because I was like, oh,
Hmm.
embodied spirituality does exist in Christianity too. And even I had to reframe like some of the practices. I mean, like singing is embodied, right? Like,
Yes.
but like, other more contemplative, like walking a labyrinth is like an ancient Christian practice. Like, they're just even like taking communion. It's embodied, but it's like
Yes.
I wasn't kind of given that framework.
Yep.
I felt more of a framework of like, uh, there's like there's sacred activities and there's like secular activities um and they're separate and a lot of it, I don't know, has to do with
Hmm.
what our body is doing at any given moment. But so I try to like consciously bring my body into like my spiritual experiences and acknowledge my body and
Yeah.
kind of fight the urge to like suppress body and emotions. So that's kind of one piece.
Hmm.
But with the divine feminine, I mean, people are really uncomfortable with this, and that's okay. I
Hmm.
will often say, I don't need you or anybody to agree with me.
Sure.
I think what I want to do is model seeing God through your own perspective, because for too long, we have all kind of been forced to see God through one perspective.
Yes.
And, in the beginning, in the Bible, in the Genesis,
Hmm.
God says, like, let us make humankind in our image.
Hmm.
And so, like, very foundationally, I have to believe that everybody's unique kind of how we show up in the world reflects the image of God. And so I think the thing that's tricky when we talk about divine feminine or like the feminine face of God is it can feel like this pendulum swing from like masculine to feminine, but I want to highlight like all the space in between
Hmm.
and how when we start to kind of broaden the spectrum of who God is, it's not to the exclusion of anyone else. It's to create a more full picture of who God is. And
Yes.
that includes people all along the gender spectrum. But I think it's really hard because we're just limited by language. And so,
Yes.
um, yeah, I think when I start to talk about God as mother, spirit as female, even Christ as
Hmm.
nurturer is the term that I like to use.
Hmm.
Um, People are really uncomfortable with it, and I like to, stir things up from time to time. And sometimes I'm like, I just want people to realize that like the root of why they're so uncomfortable with the idea of God in the female is because of misogyny.
Hmm.
And you know how like in 2020, we were all kind of going through this like racial
Yep.
reckoning kind of new moment. I remember at the time I was listening to a lot of people educating about race, and it was like we have to take the morality out of racism. We have to take the like
Mm.
good person, not racist, bad person, racist, like out of it. Because the truth is that racism kind of undergirds so much of our ways
Yes.
of existing in this country. And I think the same goes with misogyny. It's like so many of our ways of thinking, of our
Yes.
theology, um, you know,
It's
at
just
best
there.
ignores women, at
Yeah.
worst, like demonizes women. And
Yes.
there's
Yes.
so
Yes.
much precedent for that, like going back to the story of Eve in the Garden of Eden, right? And like all throughout Christian theology, like women have been demonized and yeah. And so I think when I say like at the bottom of your discomfort is misogyny, it's not because you're a bad person. It's
Yes.
just because that's the way that our brains have been trained to think. And that's the reason why, like, I will have women comment on my posts and be like, and like just say like women don't reflect the image of God. And I'm like, do you hear yourself?
Yeah.
But I mean, right now, something that I'm just enjoying focusing on is literally just going to scripture, which I feel like is such an evangelical urge of mine. I'm like, we can just proof text things, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Like, I can play
Mhm.
this game. And it's actually wild. Like,
Mhm.
when you start looking for it and paying attention, I'm
Yes.
like, it talks about like there's just so much that I could say, but there's a lot that's hidden because of translation.
Yes.
Like there's a scholar that I really admire, Dr. Will Gaffney, and
Mhm.
she basically says anytime it says spirit, it should be a feminine pronoun.
Mhm.
And so I was reading her book recently, citing it, and in her book, Womanist Midrash, she was like, you could accuse womanist theologians of being Bible literalists because
Mhm.
we're
Wow.
insisting like literally
Yes.
anytime you see spirit in the
Yeah.
Bible, it should be she.
Mhm.
But our translations don't reflect that. There's this amazing newer translation. Actually, I have it sitting on my desk. It's the First Nations
Oh yeah.
version. Have you
Yeah.
seen this one?
Yeah, I've got it somewhere.
And I'm stoked because I think they're coming out with the Psalms and Proverbs pretty soon. But
Wow. Cool.
this is just the New Testament. And one thing that I love about the First Nations version, there it is, yeah, is they use like, you know how like indigenous people have kind of descriptive names. And so they give
Yep.
descriptive names to the Bible characters. And Jesus is referred to as creator sets free, which is so beautiful. But another word that they use or phrase in the Bible, we're really familiar with the term Son of Man.
Mhm.
And they use the term true human being, which I love because
Mhm.
it's gender inclusive.
Yes.
And I've actually just started thinking about this idea of, because as a woman, as a feminist theologian, um, there's really no way to get around the maleness of Jesus as a
Yes.
person.
Mhm.
And I mean, I remember like, again, I think I was born to be a theologian because I remember being like in church as a teenager
Mhm.
and literally thinking like, I don't think Jesus gets me. Like the He
Wow.
Gets Us campaign. I'm like, how can Jesus understand me?
Yes.
Because he's a man. I
Mhm.
remember literally thinking, I'm a teenage girl. Like the thing that I care about the most right now is like getting my first kiss. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like, I don't
Totally.
think Jesus gets it.
Yep.
There's the verses in Hebrew that talks about like Jesus as our great high priest has undergone everything. And I'm like, he literally didn't go through
Yes.
this.
Yep.
So I think that's always kind of been a tricky piece. But I think hearing that phrase, the true human being, and then reading and learning from womanist and feminist theologians about
Mhm.
kind of the ways in which Jesus embodies femininity has
Yes.
really helped me. But I love the idea of the true human being because, of course, if Jesus is the incarnation of God, of course, that has to include the feminine. It has to.
Yes. Yes.
And so it's almost, I love the true human being. It's kind of like
Mm.
Jesus shows up as a person who has fully integrated the masculine and the feminine.
Mhm.
Like in yoga tradition and Buddhism, there's like the idea of yin and yang, and yin is the
Sure.
feminine, yang is the masculine. And it's like it's not about gender necessarily,
Yep.
but it's about energy and like what is being brought kind of forward in any given situation. And we can lean into our masculine side and we can lean into our feminine side and anyway, kind of seeing Jesus as kind of
Mhm.
this. fullness of humanity, which
Yeah.
inherently includes femininity, has been
Yeah.
really helpful for me.
Yeah.
And then of course proof texting. Like here's
Yeah.
times where I feel like Jesus is acting more in the feminine,
Totally.
and not to be like too gender essentialist about it. Obviously, like, it's fluid, but
Yeah.
still to be like, okay, that has been helpful for me. And I think as a woman, I need to see the places in which I
Yeah.
think Jesus understands what I've gone
Yes.
through.
Yeah. Really appreciate that. It's so good. One of the things I find that really has helped me on my journey, um, like I mean, long story short, my mom died. My mom was sick my whole life. And even the ways in which like we had to tend to my mom's body, and so my engagement with my mom's body was really unique. And like I'm 10 and cleaning her and
Mm,
things like this, and but I never really got to experience motherhood in its totality because my mom was so fragile. I couldn't even hug her all the way. And then she passed away, and then my old spirituality didn't serve me like it used to. And what do I do with all this suffering? And long story short for another episode, but I end up at this Benedictine monastery filled with sisters. And you talk about labyrinths, the best labyrinth in the world is right outside Colorado Springs. Um, but I can remember going there. I had been meeting with Sister Mary Colleen for a year or so, but it was COVID, and so we couldn't go there because they're all old and they had that place on lockdown. Um, and I remember I finally was allowed to go visit, and there was so much. I was so nervous because I was like, okay, am I allowed to hug? Like it's a woman, and I'm a Christian dude, and we're not allowed to hug nobody. And then she's old and she's a nun. Am I allowed to? And I was so nervous about, do I shake her hand? Do I whatever, right? And then I go there, Chelsea, and Sister Mary Colleen hugged me all the way,
mm,
her whole body, and just held me. And when I say I melt. I had never been hugged by an older woman like that before.
mm,
And I just everything came out, you know. All the snot, all the tears, all the
mm.
everything. All and
Yeah.
so but here's why I'm saying this as it relates to what you were just sharing. That was my healing journey, was going to this monastery that is, I mean, they built it. I mean, you would love it. It's curvy, it's these big open arms, like they built it. It's, I mean, and for the next until today, I go there and am nurtured by these women,
Mm,
nurtured by these women, and it's saved everything for me. And one of the things that I so have grown to appreciate in the example of Jesus was the way in which he subjected himself, not just by way of birth and the womb, although that is a major part of our spirituality, that he was nurtured by women the whole time, and
mhm,
that there was this that he understood he needed to be nurtured by women forever. And I think there's something to that as well, in terms of like, okay, not only his experience in trying to integrate his feminine side, but also recognizing this divine invitation that if we are to live in our fullness, we must be nurtured by women. And I've grown to really relate to Jesus in that way. And in my book, I talk a lot about belovedness, and one of my arguments is that belovedness is first known in the womb.
mm,
Belovedness is the place where there's nothing to prove, nothing to lose, nothing to fear, nothing to gain, and that Jesus shares that embodied experience of belovedness. Right? He too knew it in a womb, which then goes along. One of the words that really blew my mind was the word compassion, and the
yes.
way in which compassion, the word for compassion in the womb is so. And I can just remember the time I was sitting in a scripture circle with a rabbi, and he said, whenever you read the word compassion, you can read it as Christ is rewombing them, or Christ
Mm,
is bringing them back into the womb. Rachum,
beautiful.
rechamim.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Womb
it's
love.
and
Yeah.
so you can say, if Christ had compassion, it's Christ is rewombing them, bringing them back to that place of belovedness. And
Hmm.
why? Because he knew what it was like to be nurtured by a woman, by
Yeah.
feminine love.
And let me just
Oh,
say, because I have a whole thing on that,
yeah, yeah.
on compassion in the Old Testament in Exodus.
Hmm.
There's a story that I think is familiar where Moses wants to see God,
Yes.
and he goes up to the mountain and he's walking by God. So in this story, it's the first place in scripture where God describes God's self. And the first word that God uses is this word compassion,
Yes.
compassionate.
Yes.
The Lord is gracious and compassionate, slow to
Mhm.
anger,
Yes.
rich in love.
Yeah.
Super familiar passage.
Yes.
It's super familiar too because it's quoted throughout
Yes.
scripture, which tells us that it's kind of a key
Hmm.
passage. And when I first kind of put that all together, I'm like, the first word that God uses to describe God's self is womb love.
Yes. Yes.
I
Yeah.
don't know, like what else do we need to really say on that?
Yes.
And that's embodied, that's
Yes.
embodied. That's God with a womb. And people are so disgusted by that idea, honestly.
Hmm.
Like again, like I'll share kind of musings about like, there's verses that talk about God giving birth, God being a woman in labor. And I've had people tell me like,
Yes.
that's so disgusting that you would say
Mm.
God gives birth. And I'm like, so you think birth is disgusting?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're like, no, 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 not like human, but to think of God giving birth is disgusting. And I'm like, okay, you're gonna need to examine that
Yeah.
because,
Yes.
if we want to do this, we can do this. We can say it's biblical.
Yes.
God has a womb. God has breasts. Like, we don't want to
Yes.
talk about this because
Yes.
we've been taught that women's
Yes.
bodies are inherently bad and shameful.
Yes.
But, there's just so many things. There's this name for God, El Shaddai.
Hmm.
You grew up, listening to Amy Grant. You
Yes.
know that one. And in our Bibles, we see it translated as the Almighty or God Almighty. But another translation for this Hebrew root word is breast. And it's
Yes.
so interesting because when you go back and look at the context in which this name, El Shaddai, is used, it's often used in conversations between God and some of the patriarchs like Abraham, Isaac. And it's in the context of like fertility,
Hmm.
giving them children, making them multiply, and provision.
Yes.
Okay, so this name El Shaddai can be translated as the God who breastfeeds.
Hmm.
And that again, people are like, that's
Yes.
disgusting.
Yep.
And I'm like, or is it beautiful
Yes.
to think of God like our ultimate mother, our ultimate caretaker,
Yes.
literally feeding and sustaining
Yes.
us
Yes.
from her body?
Yes. Yes.
Um, and then that goes
Which we
into
have
this.
no problem talking about Christ's body saving us. Like that little niche of the language, like, oh, his body was broken for us. And yet but it has to be in that one lane, right?
Well, and it's so sanitized. I think
Yeah.
it's because I think the thing is, we just fear what's unfamiliar.
Yes. Yes.
And so we can literally say that we're born again Christians,
Hmm.
right? And never relate that to birth.
Yes,
Like,
without a womb.
right? And it's like one of those paradigm shifts. Like once
Yes.
you see it, you're like, oh my gosh, like how
Mm.
could I not see that? And like even Paul, Paul that the feminists love to hate, like Paul talks about himself as a nurturer, as a mother,
Yep.
as a woman in labor, crying out.
Yep.
Paul talks about needing to graduate from drinking spiritual milk to whole
Hmm.
food, like so these metaphors for God, and that's the other thing that drives me crazy, is like literally all as a mystic, as a good contemplative, I'm like all we have to talk about God is metaphors. We're
Yeah.
always just grasping
Yes.
for metaphors to describe this unknowable reality. And yet, because of the history and tradition, these metaphors for God that are masculine are capital T truth. But then any metaphor for God that is feminine is like, well, that's a metaphor.
Hmm.
And it's like, yeah, so is the idea of God as father.
Yes. Yes.
So, it's infuriating, but there's a
Yes.
lot of work to do, which is also exciting, because it's
Yes.
work that I want to do.
Mm. And I'm so glad you're doing it. So, for someone, Chelsea, who isn't hasn't gone quite this far on their journey yet, who have very quickly almost thought about turning this podcast off. Um, what does this change? Like, why should I, if I've not embraced this feminine nature of God, if I've not considered the way in which, God has a feminine attribute, if not more than that, that God is feminine, that God is a woman, what does it even change? Like, why does this matter? For somebody who's at stage one of this, who is just diet curious, what changes in your life? What changes in my life when I let the sisters nurture me and teach me about a feminine God? When we begin to consider childbirth and labor and breastfeeding and an embodied life. How does this actually change me?
Hmm.
How does it actually change you? We can talk about this. Okay, these words are cool. And no, of course, I wholeheartedly have been changed by the feminine God. But yeah, what would you say to that? What would you encourage? Why should somebody explore this or go down this path?
It's a big question. I think, it's particular for each person, the way in which it would change them. But I think a lot about how, depending on the day, um, I can be either furious that we kind of got so much wrong from like day one
Hmm.
of early church.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I can be like equally on a good day liberated and
Yes.
excited because it kind of means that we get to, I feel like my role as a theologian right now is just to kind of comb through um, scripture, tradition, history, and bring forward the pieces that are liberating and that do speak to us today. I think like so from a very foundational level, you know, I guess what's coming to mind right now, really, because I just right before I got on this call with you, I was scrolling Instagram and saw this video of a ICE agent in a court outside in a courthouse with a lawyer, an immigration lawyer, and several of this lawyer's clients. And the ICE agent is like talking to the lawyer, basically saying, like, I have orders to detain one of your clients.
Hmm.
And he's like, but you have options. And she's like, what's the option? Because she was explaining like they have this court date and now they have this next court date in like a week. So what are you saying? And the ICE agent was basically like, well, I can either take one or I can take all three of them. And what struck me is just the dehumanization.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so literally he did not care. He literally was like, I can take one or all like it's just like just grab one
Hmm.
and completely just not seeing these three individuals as like beloved
Hmm.
children of God.
Hmm.
And I think so many of us are really disturbed right now by the dehumanization that we
Yes.
see,
Yes.
whether that be in immigration conversations, whether that be in abortion conversations.
Hmm.
So, like, if we really zoom out at the way in which our society functions, so much of it functions on the personhood of white privileged landholding, was the language of the Constitution, right? Men.
Hmm.
And so when that is our foundation for how we operate as a society,
Hmm.
it leads to dehumanization of other bodies.
Yes.
And so I think there's so many things, but that's just
Yes.
the thing that came to mind right now that would make it relevant for anyone is like, we have to expand our imagination for what God looks like.
Yes. Because it puts the image of God in all people in front of us, which then leads to peace and compassion and love.
Exactly. Because yeah, if we see God as a woman, it's much harder to dehumanize a woman. If we
Yes.
see God as an immigrant, it's much harder to dehumanize an immigrant. It's
Yes.
And that feels so kind of like existential but I truly believe like it's a foundational. And that's why, when I was talking about racism and misogyny kind of
Hmm.
being our operating systems,
Sure.
I think when we experience discomfort about new ideas, we want to kind of just walk away from them or label them as like really out there or
Yep.
whatever. But I think we have to really learn to sit with discomfort
Yep. Yep.
in order to be changed.
Yep. It strikes me, in talking about the ways in which Jesus was nurtured by Mary and by a feminine God, that if we want to be people who manifest the beatitudes, the ways of Jesus, we must be willing to be nurtured by women in the same way. And because it's the fuel of the engine. It's what lets it be made manifest as we move forward. Um,
Mhm. Well, and also like again, this is like a really high level, even like policy level issue. My work, I often flow between like theological
mhm.
commentary, political and social commentary, cultural
Sure.
commentary. Um, because again, it's like if we're saying that this nurturing, this care work is women's work,
Mhm.
you can see how the lack of value for that is reflected by our culture because of the ways in which people are not paid well,
Yes.
the ways in which our policies don't actually support families with healthcare, with childcare. When we compare ourselves to like other Western countries, like in Europe, you know what I mean? So it's like we devalue this nurturing work, but within the church, there's like this whole trad wife culture that's kind of on the rise that's glorifying care work, domestic labor, but it's unpaid
Yep.
most of the time, or it's
Yep.
very poorly paid.
Yeah.
So even within our system of capitalism, that kind of work is devalued. And it ultimately, again, I think comes down to the fact that we don't value women.
Yep. Yeah.
We don't see women as fully human. And another piece that I really just want to say, because it keeps coming to mind, is like, yes, Jesus was nurtured by women,
Mhm.
but also Jesus nurtured.
Yes.
Throughout scripture, there's so many little phrases in the gospels that say Jesus
Yes.
was moved by compassion.
Mhm.
Like in every single gospel, that little
Yes.
phrase shows up over and
Yes.
over. And I'm obsessed with lately, like the end of John,
Mhm.
when in the upper room at the Last Supper, like I just come back to that over and over again because I'm like, what Jesus is doing there is incredibly
Mhm.
remarkable. Like he's hours from kind of the initiation of his death,
Yep.
and he's still holding such compassionate space
Yes.
for his friends, which again, I don't want to say like men can't do that, but like the compassion, the
Yes.
caretaking,
Yes.
even on the cross, um, Jesus like looks down at his mom and his disciples and like creates a family for them,
Mhm.
weaves this social fabric for them and
Yeah.
saying like I'm not I mean it's like honestly beautiful. It's such a mothering posture like when Jesus says like I will not leave you as orphans.
Yeah. Yes.
I'm going to send the spirit, which again, as we've talked
Yes.
about, it's
Yes.
this feminine face of God. And so it's like, yes, Jesus was nurtured by women, and Jesus also modeled nurture.
Yes. So good. Um, mm, I just, yeah, that makes me want to cry. Um,
Hmm.
I also think just quickly as you say that too, bringing this full circle, you're talking about a hearty breakfast, and they're thinking about Jesus just making the fish breakfast for Peter, and just again, like it wasn't even just a conversation, like he cooked a meal, when they were reconciling, and he was bringing him back into the fold and cooking breakfast on the beach.
Well, it's women's work,
Amen.
right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's so good.
yeah.
I don't want to take up too much more of your time. You're writing a book. We didn't even get to liberated womanhood, the book you're writing. All of that. Uh, I would love to interview you again. I've got so many other things I want to talk about, but would you be willing to just open the window a little bit into what you're specifically writing about as you're on your book journey here?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. Yeah, it's slated to be published in September of 2026, so we have some time. But it's essentially it's like a personal exploration of some aspects of my story. It's a theological exploration of feminist, womanist, liberation theology, contemplative
Mm,
spirituality. It's political, social, cultural commentary, but it's essentially like uh, I think when I started to realize who I actually am, what I actually want out of my life,
mhm.
um, what I have to offer the world, it didn't look like the version of Christian womanhood, I have that in quotes, that I was taught to idealize.
Yep.
And I felt really lost. I felt like there was only one way to be a faithful Christian woman. Um, and it was like a very traditional role in the
Yes.
home. And I was like so deeply, as we've talked about, like felt like such a failure from the first moment of birth, and just had so many experiences where I felt like my body betrayed me. And it's like, this is not going how I thought it was going to go. Like, I thought I was going to get married, have kids, and just like live happily ever after. And it was just so deeply unsatisfying. It just was not what I wanted, even though it has nothing to do with my children. Like, I
Yes.
love them, and being a mother is a joy. But it's also like the ways in which, um, this, like we were kind of talking about, the church elevates this role for women, but then women are not actually supported to be in that role,
Yep.
by family structure, by capitalism, by our policies in the United States. And so it's like you're really set up to fail and also internalize that failure as like, what is wrong with me?
Yep.
And so the book is very much a pathway for women who um, just need a different way to show up and still be living into like
Wow.
faithfulness, which it's interesting. That word and feels so important to me. I feel like it's been weaponized a
Mhm.
lot to kind of keep people in line. And so it's kind of like a reclamation of this idea of faithful Christian womanhood, that actually provides space for women to be honest about
Yeah.
the ways in which church culture and broader American culture is not really serving us and wasn't built to serve us. Um, so I kind of I hope that it's helpful for women who feel like I can't be myself and
Yes.
be a faithful follower of Christ to
Mhm.
really provide space. So I talk a lot from my experience, um, because I kind of came to these discoveries through motherhood, but I think there's so many ways that we experience kind of rupture, whether it's through queerness or through, blackness or through, like even just, whatever it is, the ways in which we fail, getting a divorce, like all the ways that are labeled of like, that was not, I realized that set me kind of
The
outside.
great falls of mankind. The fall. All
Yeah.
these failures.
Yeah. And so,
Hmm.
I hope that it creates like a really expansive, vision
Yeah.
for people to be honest about
Yep.
our lives,
Yep.
and seeing God, like I was talking about, seeing God through our own perspective, through our own body, and like really, um, seeing that as sacred.
Yeah.
So,
Oh, that's so good. It's like I'm pretty sure it's Thomas Merton who said, for me, to be a saint means to be myself,
mhm.
and to really anchor into that. Um, can I ask you one more? Do you have time for one more question?
Yeah.
I'll make it quick. You have a tattoo that says, you know what to do.
Hmm.
Teach us about that really quickly. It's so important. I mean, this is 90% of my work as a spiritual director is pretty much that tattoo. Would you lead us out here just with a small invitation into that type of lens through which we can see our existence as humans?
Absolutely. Yeah. So actually, in my first chapter of my book, I write about how, well, I kind of jokingly say like Christianity up until this point has kind of been, for men by men.
Mhm.
And so I often shorthand will say like my book is kind of like, what if Christianity was for women by women.
Mm-hmm.
How does that just shift the lens on
Mm-hmm.
so many things?
Mm-hmm.
And so I write about in that first chapter the concept of, the true self and the false self, which is very familiar within contemplative
Yep.
Christianity. But there's these like certain verses that just have gotten weaponized. And
Mm-hmm.
one of them is Jesus saying, you have to deny yourself and take up
Mm-hmm.
your cross and follow me. Another one is in Jeremiah that talks about the heart is deceitful
Yep.
and desperately wicked, beyond saving. And so
Mhm.
I argue in that chapter, like this is the first chapter. This is like foundational to the rest of my theology, is the idea that um, and actually I kind of got this idea from this writer, Holly Whitaker, who writes in the sobriety space. She wrote a book called Quit Like a Woman, which is basically like sobriety. She talks about how like the 12-step program, she believes, is similar. It's like for men by men. And the first step of the 12-step program is like admit you're powerless. So Holly has this whole spiel about like, yeah, if you're marginalized, you already know that you're powerless.
Mm-hmm.
Like you've been operating from a powerless position the whole time. And so maybe the first step for marginalized people is not to admit that we're powerless, but
Yep.
it's to admit that we have power.
Ooh.
Yeah. And so I explore that and kind of bring that idea into like this theological framework of the self. And so,
Damn.
Jesus says, deny yourself and take up your cross and follow me. But then
Mm-hmm.
Jesus also says, whoever will lose their life
Yes.
will find it. And then it also says, like, basically, what does it mean? I'm really getting it wrong, but like, basically, if you gain the whole world but lose yourself.
Yep.
And that's the piece that I kind of pull out for women or,
Mm-hmm.
and again, I don't want to exclude anyone. If it resonates. But in my own experience, it's like my whole life, all I was ever taught was to deny myself.
Yep.
And I completely molded myself around denying myself, taking up the cross of the culture and
Mm-hmm.
following the culture rather than following Christ. And the problem is that I did gain the whole world. I did
Yes.
gain the whole world. I married the great Christian guy. I had the kids. Like life looks good. Like I made all the right choices, but inside I was dying because I had lost myself.
Yes. Yes.
And so it's this reclamation of the self.
Yes.
And that quote that you said, that's like the closer we get to ourself, the closer we get to God, the Spirit. And
Yes.
so that tattoo,
Mm-hmm.
I have it right on my wrist. And it's like a little, I don't know, I find myself kind of like touching it throughout the day, but it just is this grounding reminder that I don't have to deny myself
Mm-hmm.
in order to be faithful to Christ, and
Yep.
I can trust myself. Just really quickly on that Jeremiah verse, I write about this in my book too, but a better translation is actually the heart is deep beyond knowing, um, and only God can kind of plumb the depths. It's this idea of like the depth of the ocean. It's like
Wow.
unknowable. And so it's only through relationship with God and the Spirit that we
Mm.
can know our hearts and that we can trust that we can operate from that place. Jesus talks a lot about like, blessed are the pure in heart. And again, I always thought that meant like you have to be perfect,
Yep.
purity, right? But
Mm.
actually, I now see that as blessed are those who kind of operate from this deep well of truth that is the self, that is the spirit of God within us. And so, yeah, you know what to do because God has God is with us. Spirit is in our
Yes.
hearts, and we've been taught to ignore that, and so we
Yes.
need to reclaim that.
Yes. Oh, thank you. Hmm. Where can people find you, Chelsea, to engage with your work, be taught by you? Where can they find you?
It's pretty easy. Everything you can just search Chelsea Kim Long, chelseakimlong.com. I'm on Instagram only right now. And then I'm also on Insight Timer if people are into meditation. I have maybe like 50 meditations on Insight Timer. And a lot of these themes, like, I have one about womb love, I have tons. And so I'm really I love doing those. I'm taking a little bit of a break from recording new ones right now, but I have a bunch up on Insight Timer. It's free to access. So that's probably the best places to find me. Come say hi. You can follow me on Instagram. You can subscribe to my newsletter at my website.
Awesome. And I'll put all that in the show notes. Chelsea, thank you so much. You are a gift. I'm so thankful to get to learn from you, and can't wait to keep going on this journey together and to watch you continue to flourish in your work. So, thanks for spending some time with me today.
Thanks, Tyler. It's been really
All right.
sweet.